Hey, Happy New Year. I'm going to keep the rants short because I got some hate on my last one, which is kind of funny. But at any rate, if you don't like it, tune out. Because I tune out the negative comments. Because I don't let that stuff occupy my life. At any rate, I'm going to be doing a bunch of different videos now. And household patterns. I've got some new stuff in terms of flies to show you. That's going to come at a later date. But I'm going to do some more simpler stuff now. Weighted things, some wet flies, some stuff you've already seen, but you know, everybody has their own little flair on how they like to tie stuff and how they like to fish it too. So I'm going to show you the ways that I like some of these flies. Nothing crazy. Had some stuff going on here in the shop. I finally, geez, we've been in this place now for going on their 6th year, and there was one major part of my shop that I neglected, and I finally took the time at the break to kind of finish it off, and it's worked out. I got a lot of space in here. I feel like stepbrothers. I got more room to do activities. So anyway, as you saw, there was a few added flies to the store this past week. Some more in the jig category. I'm going to tie a jig today, and it's simple, and it's just another listen, there's a billion variations of buggers out there. For you bugger guys, I don't fish these that much, but this is one that I do particularly like. It's on the jig platform, has an oversized bead on it, and it actually has a flasher style body to it. No chenille. There's a million different things you can do, but it's just a different variation, nothing crazy. But it catches fish regardless. As you've heard me say before, I am a fly tyer by nature. Past guy, do a little bit here and there, not as much as I used to, but fish more for myself now. The fly doesn't mean anything. It's the person holding the cork at the end of the fly rod. So I've caught fish on bare hooks, pieces of felt, thread on hooks. I mean, it's granted there's a time and a place. I've said this before. You make this endeavor whatever you want. I have friends that like to go way down the rabbit hole with bait fish patterns that are ultra realistic. They have their moments. Suggestive stuff works. Do what you like. Just have fun doing it. Enough of me talking out loud. I had some other stuff I was going to discuss, but I think I'll save that for another day. Anyway, I'm going to show you guys how to tie this simple little jig bugger, and then we'll go from there. Alright? Cool. Alright folks, so here we're going to tie this little jig style bugger. A little bit of flare on here. First things first, I have a Firehole 570. This is number 4 jig hook in the vise. It's a really good jig hook for tying any kinds of these streamers. This one's a 3XL, 3XG, extra heavy. It's a neat little hook. Really like it for tying a lot of these jigs that you're going to add weight to the fly with tungsten and not use like a lead jig head per se. We've got a Spawn 6.3 millimeter slotted tungsten bead on here, and then what we're going to do to seat that is we're going to take some 20 thousandths lead free wire. You could use lead wire if you want, and we're just going to take that wire, and it doesn't matter really how many turns you take. I just kind of want that to kind of be right in. It's going to end right about where the beak of the hook is, to be quite honest. If you're a little over it, it's fine. I'm really going to push that stuff right in there. That's going to keep that bead in place. Then what I'm going to do, we're using 8/0 black Vivus today, as you can see here, but you can use any kind of thread you want. Just flatten that piece of lead wire out. I'm going to start behind that wire, go forward a little bit, and then take that, tag in a thread. You don't have to do this, but I just kind of like it because it helps lock it in place. Bring it all the way back up to the bead, work your way back down, then you can cut it off, and then go right to about where the bend is. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take 2 small Bugger marabou plumes, going to kind of sandwich the two of these guys together. And you typically want them about the length of your shank of your jig hook. So I'll come in here, measure this. If it's slightly longer, it's fine. I'm just going to transfer it. You can wet these if you want. That's totally up to you. I think with fluffier style marabou like this is, it can make it a little bit more unruly and problematic. When I go to tie this, as you'll see, both stems are going to kind of splay right along the underbody of this fly until I get up to about a point just back from the bead. And then we'll just wrap right over that. Make a nice thin underbody if you'd like, just like you see here. Next thing we're going to do, take some black wire. You could use any kind. Ultra wire works fine. You can use an alternative color if you'd like. There's two ways of doing this. You could have left your thread up here. I'm actually going to tie it in like so. Wrap right over it, right up to the bead, fold it over, wrap right back over it. Reason being, we're going to leave that out of the way. That's going to be our counter rib for our hackle. Next thing we're going to do, and because this is a smaller fly, I don't like to use any kinds of chenilles on these because I find that the chenilles will make it bulkier, and I want this to kind of sink really, really fast. Hence the heavy bead, etc. So what we're going to do is we're just going to spin a dubbing loop and use some ice dub. So what I'm going to do is zoom the camera out a little bit here so you can kind of see my loop. Make sure she's kind of good to go. So I'll take my thread. We're only going to need to make a loop of a couple inches. Make a loop, go around it twice, and then advance my thread right up back behind the eye. And then I'm going to use my bobbin cradle to get that kind of out of the way. Take your dubbing spinner, whatever you have, take your loop, and what you're going to do here is I'm going to pick out roughly 1 to 2, actually 2 to 3 inches, probably about 2.5 ice dub as you see here. And the cool thing with this is it doesn't have to be right up against that bead there, but I've got a fairly sparse amount, and if there's too much on there, so I'm going to spin it for a second, get about halfway through. I can kind of pull some of it out because I want this relatively sparse. Put that right back in my pile and just continue to spin it. And then we're just going to wrap it. So I'll zoom right back in so you can see where I'm at. And then we'll just use the rotary function on the vise. Go right back to the base where my thread starts. Do a couple turns of thread right over that from the base there. Get my dubbing or my bobbin cradle out of the way here. It's always fun dealing with that with the camera in the way. Take 3 turns over it, 3 in front. You can trim it off. And then just make sure that that is binded right down. If you take a look at this too, I've got a nice little buggy underbody. Next thing we're going to do is take one saddle hackle, one that's preferably shiny, and it's got some taper to it like this one does. So it's not just all straight uniform. I want it kind of tapered because that's going to, I want it to be a little bit larger up here near the bead and taper back towards the rear of the fly. Nice thing is what we're going to do is we're going to use that slot on that bead because we're going to take this concave side flat, so it's going to curve like this. We're going to take the stem of that particular feather, or we're going to jam it right up into the bead, laying that saddle hackle flat right there. On the body of the fly. Then we're going to take our hackle pliers, And first two turns are going to be right here, and then we're going to right behind the bead, and then we're going to basically hold that feather at an angle so we have a nice even spiraled palmered body. And I can go one more, so it's right to the end. Then we're going to take our wire, which you see here, and our wire, without grabbing your tail, is going to be counter ribbed right through that hackle. Once we have one turn on there, then we can just kind of go right back through it all, just like you see here. And then my suggestion is this: take that wire, wrap it around once, twice, drop your bobbin cradle out of the way, take a few turns, 3 over, 3 in front, take your thumbnail, wiggle that wire back and forth, bust the burr off. And you can go in there, trim that little tag in, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of make sure to clean this up a little bit. Just take a couple turns over that hackle. And now what we're going to do to kind of spruce it up and just give it a little something, so we're going to take a guinea hen feather, brush all the fibers rearward like you see here, and we're going to lay that, same thing, flat, right on top. Take our hackle pliers, and you could have trimmed that fluff away if you really wanted to. Take one turn. Each turn you can kind of pull a little bit of that back if you'd like. It's entirely up to you. One turn, 2 turns, and then we're going to tie it off, as you'll see here. One, 2, 1 in front. If you let go of that with your hackle pliers, you can just trim that out of the way. Take your fingers, just gonna fold that rearward. If you got any little buttons in there, my eyes are pretty bad. I've been tying a lot of flies today. Just gonna wrap right over that. And if you take your fingers, as you run this through here, you can really open up those fibers there. Last thing we're gonna do, you could just whip finish this right here if you really wanted to. But what I'm gonna do is I just take a little tiny bit of squirrel dub, and we're just gonna cover up those butt ends there. It kind of complements the fly nicely. 4-turn whip finish. Pulling that a little bit, it'll seat that thread right down inside of there. And there's your fly. As I said before, you can kind of go crazy with colors. I like a lot of earth tones on these, but you can go wacky browns and yellows, and kind of like an autumn splendor, all white with some peach and pink, whatever works for you. But that's it, simple little jig bugger. Quick one to tie. If I wasn't talking so much, I probably could have ripped out about 40. So that's it. Hope you enjoy it. Have a good day. Thanks for tuning in.